On the behalf of the entire Vision Consortium, I very welcome you to the workshop on the future of teaching, creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship for higher education institutions. So just a quick intro, what is it about? Um, Vision is a Erasmus Plus funded project, and we try in this project, which started last year and will go until end of this year. We try to envision, with the help of stakeholders, what the future of learning specifically in these domains of creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship will be. So, who are the partners in this project? So, what kind of institutions we have in our consortium? Yeah, we have a very interesting mix of universities, small and medium and large size companies, NGOs. So we have a very different perspectives and different and diverse partners inside there. And a little bit about the state of the project. So where are we now? Yeah, we started by conducting interviews with stakeholders in this domain. So about 130 interviews. And out of these interviews, we started to extract different information, so to say, that we elaborated in several internal workshops. So among the project partners, so to say, we tried to verify and validate them in workshops with external partners. And at the end, what came out of this consolidation part, there was our book team that I will introduce later on, that tried to analyze and structure all the findings we had and put this into a handbook, which is called the Vision Handbook. And what we will present today is a draft of this book, and we are very interested in hearing your opinions about what we are going to present, and also to give feedback, whether you have additional ideas, whether you think certain things maybe are you are more affected from them in your daily work life, or which do not play that major role. So yeah, this is um, the state of the project. So who is here today from the project? We are not going to introduce all of us in detail, but here is just the book team, so to say, is consisting of Kyriaki, Olga, then I think Rajneesh today could not come, Karina I think also not, um, and myself, Michele, hello again. And then there is Lucia from ISPIM here. I think, I don't know if Irma is here, which is our visual artist, so to say. Then Anna Bessent, Anna Sain, Sophie from Emuni, Dietmar Schlösser from TÜV Nord, Tim Jones, Darren Mew, Stephen from De Gruyter, and Stefan from Innofora. So this is our team. So how will this workshop or be structured today? We have a flexible agenda, as we as we say, but this is our plan at least, and let's see how it evolves. So I will give the stage later, pass the stage to Kyriaki and Olga, that will give an overview on our book draft, so to say, and show what kind of insights and shifts we identified so far. And after that, we will have some Q&A phase, so to say, for understanding questions. And then if we have time, we plan to have 3 quick mini workshops within the workshop, tackling 3 different aspects of the book. And yeah, later on we will have final comments, and if we have time, also a little bit of a feedback session about the workshop. So this is what we planned for today. And if there is no question at this point, I would directly jump into the book overview and give the stage to Kyriaki, I would say first.
Yeah. Thank you, Michele, and again, thank you everyone for joining us today. I believe you might have received the kind of the excerpts or the overall draft of the book. Is that correct? Okay, so just I will very briefly kind of now highlight the key elements of the book to get your feedback. The title of the book mirrors the title of our Erasmus project. So it's envisioning the future of learning for creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship, and it has three core parts. The first part, we talk about the shifts in the learning landscape, and I'll talk about it next. Then we have a part on the tools and resources, and then lastly, some case studies. The introduction, we emphasize the importance of creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship. We discovered through our interviews and also the literature review, what's happening at the policy level at the European Commission, that these three kind of skills, competences are featured in this at the core of future of learning, future of work, skills for the industry 4.0 and so forth. So this is just to say a little bit more about why we're focusing on these three competencies. Next. So the main one of the main findings of our work was that teaching creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship today, but also more in the future, pushes against some of the foundations of modern learning. And now we are experiencing these shifts. And what are they? They have to do with the foundations, like the role of the teacher, who is no longer lecturer and a subject expert, but when you think in the future, and especially the future for creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship, the lecturer has extended roles. He's a coach or she's a coach, a facilitator, a learning experience designer. The student is more active. Then classrooms and lecture halls become a little bit not as useful because the students have to work in teams and also interact more actively with the outside work, and also the subject matter. Before it was very discipline oriented, but now we see more, and we will see more in the future, cross-sector and multidisciplinary collaborations. Then kind of very briefly talking about the modes of learning that we see changing. So in terms of style, traditionally people worked on their own independently, but now in the future of learning, and especially for creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship, I emphasize also that a lot, is that it's more teamwork, more collaborative. While before you had a textbook that was very discipline specific, there's a lot more resources and interactive technologies that are being used. And the process of learning is not linear, but it's iterative. And it's a journey that is exploratory, experimental, and risky. And then all of these have implications on the learning results. So while before, students would take tests throughout the course, now in this shifting landscape, it's more about the process. Failure is encouraged. There's no papers and exams don't feature, versus what is more important is our prototypes and solutions and business plans and so forth. It's not so much about knowledge as the outcome of everything, but it's about skills and competencies. And then finally, impact in a lot of what we see when people are teaching creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship is to make a real life impact for society at large. So this is kind of the core of our book. And then now the next slides, I will just show you briefly how we are presenting this. So we'll have different sections that each describes a little in more detail the shifts that we mentioned. Next slides, please, overall, and then we'll deep dive into how are the roles changing. Next slides, please. What do we mean by that the lecture halls are no longer the spaces where people learn, for example, and we give examples of flexible spaces or activities that happen outside the boundaries of academia. Next slide. And also how the subject matter is not it's not disciplinary specific, but it breaks the boundaries of traditional kind of academic fields. So this is just to give you an example of how we are going to be presenting these shifts that I kind of briefly described. And next slide. And I think now Olga will jump in. Is it now, Olga, or is it so? And what we're planning to do then in the second part is link these shifts in the learning landscape and then eventually connect them with specific tools. Olga, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Kiki. And I mean, to some extent, you guys are the perfect audience because you all kind of work around creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship in the engineering context or in the business school. So it would be great to have your feedback on this first shift, on the shifts that Kyriaki described, because to some extent they summarize things that we see in the literature and during the interviews that we've conducted with academics, but also university administrators with ed tech environment, but also in the corporate settings. So your view would be quite great in there. And what we do and why we actually identified those shifts is actually to see, okay, so how different tools and things that we see like toolkits, processes, someone mentioned challenge-based learning initially. So how are these elements positioned in order to help us think through these shifts and start to implement them from different perspectives? And if we go, for instance, to a next slide. Yeah, it's loading. Yeah, so basically here, I mean, I'm fully aware that you can't read, but this is just to basically outline that what we try to do is not to say, okay, based on these shifts or based on our findings, we're developing new tools and new methods. No, we actually think that there is a lot out there, which is quite great, but a bit siloed sometimes and used, for instance, like design thinking or challenge-based learning might not be used in a holistic way, or there are actually great examples that we can connect in there. So what we try to do in the second part of the book is actually to start mapping in this learning landscape all different tools and methods that will help us to think, I don't know, about the role of teacher, how to put a student in the center, different spaces for learning, like subject matter, like challenge-based learning, problem-based learning, other approaches. And so we started to map some of the tools and techniques here, and we're very happy to discuss with you and get your feedback on that, because I think Kyriaki mentioned, but this book, I mean, it's still work in progress and it's an open access book. So we do not want to claim ownership for it. It's actually a book for everyone. So you can use it as a resource for you in the future. And that's how we want to build it with all of you to some extent. And if we go to a next slide, just to give you an idea of how we, I mean, obviously all these tools and processes, they're not unique to each particular shifts. Like if you think about, I don't know, design thinking, it will be helping us to, I don't know, put the student in the center, work through a process of learning, think about the outcomes. So what we try to do is kind of present what I call tangrams. So tangrams, somehow our visions of thinking, okay, across all the shifts, you can have multiple methods, multiple tools, multiple toolkits that you can use. And we will try to represent them in a way, for instance, This is just an example on the next slide. Yeah, so I mean, it's a silly example. We might not use a cat or a dog analogy, but this is just to show you that we see it as something modular, something that everyone can adjust for their own preferences, their own challenges. Like teaching creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship in business school would not be the same as teaching it or implementing that in basically in the engineering space. Or there will be many similarities, but there will be some differences. So how can we reflect that, and how can we ensure that these things are modular and can also evolve in the future? So that's the idea somehow of this second part that will connect to different shifts. And then if you go to the next slide, I'll quickly introduce the idea of the third part. And again, we're very, very open for a feedback. The third part is basically just to show you, to give examples of what's happening already in different organizations in terms of those shifts and which kind of tools and methods we see these organizations using. And in a way, we did not limit ourselves to just higher educational institutions, but we thought it would be interesting to provide here cases coming from higher educational institutions like Minerva and Fusion Point, but then also edtech companies, startups. We know there's a lot happening out there in the world. And then also bring examples coming from the corporate settings, like digital academies, lifelong learning, universities created by different companies. And here the list is not finalized. We are still working on it, and we're still collecting some interesting cases. This is just to provide you with some examples. So very happy to get your feedback also on different cases that you feel are very, very interesting and deserving our attention. And then in the next slide, which will be my final one, is just to show you like how we are going to somehow present and analyze these cases across different shifts. I don't know if you are familiar with Minerva, but Minerva is AKH business school. It's created in the US, and they're trying to change the way education works. So here it's pretty much discipline-free, focused on skills. For instance, they track skills and they have self-reflection for students, where students kind of reflect on which skills they gain when they go through different challenges. So quite interesting. And for instance, what we do here is try to position different clouds of how different cases are positioned across different shifts, so people can reflect on, I don't know, if a U is trying to, I don't know, implement a different challenge-based processes, so they can look into how Minerva is organizing their teaching or things like that. So that's the idea of the case studies. And so we have these three different parts of the book in order to kind of initiate the dialogue on how we can see shifts and start to implement shifts within the higher educational institution. And obviously, this is just the beginning of the journey, and we will be super happy to discuss with you.